Elizabeth May, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So we've seen the pre-election budget from Bill Morneau. What are your first impressions?
Well, it is a pre-election budget. There's some things I was happy to see, discussing the plight of people like the Sears workers who lost their pensions in bankruptcy, talking about what we should do for students with interest payments on student loans, helping first-time home buyers get into the market. But when you look at the fine print, you find that those measures and many others require legislation to be passed. So even if the budget passes, those measures can't come into play until 35 separate legislative measures are passed. And we're now in March, and this Parliament doesn't resume till next month in April. You can't physically get most of these measures passed before the election.
But they do. They do become then a statement of the government the Liberals can campaign on and say, look, if you want any of this stuff, you got to pick us again.
Well, that's clearly the intention. So they can bring in, I'm sure there'll be an omnibus budget bill that includes a number of these measures, and we won't have time to pass it, get it through the House maybe, get it to the Senate. No, not before the election, very unlikely. Meanwhile, the climate crisis is once again ignored in this budget. There's some token measures. They're good, but they completely fail to be what's necessary.
We cover some more. Is this, as a person who's really committed and focused on climate change in this country, does this do anything to deal with that? Is this, can they call this a climate budget? No, not at all. There's about $1.4 billion over a 5-year period, which pales in comparison to Bill Morneau writing a check in August for $4.5 billion to Kinder Morgan to buy a 65-year-old leaky pipeline. So their priorities are not in fighting fossil fuels, but rather or in even giving Canadians renewables. We have one really good thing in here that I like, a $1 billion blast, 1 year only, to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to roll out good programs, which we know FCM can do. They've got a good track record, to help homeowners with eco-energy retrofits, to help municipalities with the same. But what sense does it make to provide that money for 1 year only? Certainly, a great organization like FCM is going to want to know some certainty. You set up a program, you crank it up, and it's 1 year only? It doesn't make sense. We've seen, it's a pretty different way that we're seeing the budget delivered today, given delay tactics in the House, and all of this, the battle over Jody Wilson-Raybould and a committee decision with a Liberal majority today to not have her back. What do you make of what's unfolding here?
Well, I'm very sympathetic to the fact that we are using parliamentary tools to draw attention to the fact that it's not acceptable to say that we've now closed the books on. There was inappropriate pressure brought to bear on our Attorney General. I'm firmly convinced the more, you get really into this stuff, Peter, and I know a lot of our viewers are not that interested. I just did a cross-country tour without open town hall meetings, and I heard about climate change and pharmacare in every meeting. I only had one questioner in one of 19 communities that asked me about SNC-Lavalin. That said, the more I get into this, I said, this is an attempt to stop this from going to trial, to protect the reputation of some of Canada's so-called respected business leaders who may find their reputations tarnished when we find out what SNC-Lavalin was actually doing in Libya, who was involved, who knew. I think that's why they don't want a trial in open court. I'm committed to seeing SNC-Lavalin go to court, open court, so Canadians can really root out corrupt activities within our corporate sector, and the punishment should fit the crime. I think SNC-Lavalin should get community service, where they have to do all the work in infrastructure projects that we can think up, bring their smart engineers to work, put their workers to work, stimulate the economy with the projects, but say, well, your punishment, SNC-Lavalin, is you don't get to make any profit on these projects. You're doing community service.
All right, Green Party leader Elizabeth May, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.